On today's Rice Rewind, I'm going to be re-releasing my interview with the infamous monetary architect, Bernard von Nothaus. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with who Bernard is, he designed, developed, and issued the private gold and silver-backed currency known as the Liberty Dollar in 1998. We're going to learn more about Bernard, the Liberty Dollar, and his fight against the U.S. government that resulted in him being convicted of counterfeiting. But he also took a bullet for freedom, and he helped to get an old court precedent changed. He saved cryptocurrency, and some believe he influenced Satoshi Nakamoto. This interview was originally recorded and released on August 25th, 2021. Now, before I play the interview with Bernard, I'm going to be sharing a clip from the interview that I did with Bernard's son, Extra von Nothaus. He's with LD2, the Liberty Dollar 2, and in this clip, he's going to be explaining about the law that was used to convict his father of counterfeiting. I will be playing the rest of that clip after the full interview with Bernard, and there will be a link down below in the video description so you can watch that full interview.
Instead of going after him for fraud, they went after him for counterfeiting, which was a law that was written in the 1860s as a way of stopping the Confederacy from creating their own currency during the Civil War.
This is the part that I really want to put emphasis on, because your father lost the criminal case, but the law that they were able to use to convict him of counterfeiting, because I was asking your dad, how are they able to convict you of counterfeiting if you're not trying to replicate United States money, Federal Reserve debt notes?
Mm-hmm. Basically, the history was that the Union, right, during the Civil War was concerned that the Confederacy was going to start creating their own money. There was a law passed that basically it's two sentences. It says basically, if you create a currency that is competing with the U.S. dollar, regardless of what it looks like, you're guilty of counterfeiting. By just the definition of him creating an alternative currency, a competing currency to the US dollar, then he was violating this law, this counterfeiting law. The simple point that he did create an alternative currency, a competing currency, and promoted it that way, did violate this law that, like I said, had never been used before. Judge Voorhees had a real, well, in his opinion, he clearly has a real problem with the DOJ cherry-picking a law from the 1860s that had never been used before in order to prosecute somebody today because their fraud case fell apart. And so what he did was he sent an entirely new precedent in his last order, which basically said that this law cannot be used against individuals going forward.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a guest who I have been looking forward to talking to for quite some time. I am joined by Bernard von Nothaus. He is a monetary architect. He designed, developed, and issued the private gold and silver-based Liberty Dollar in October of 1998. We're going to be talking about the Liberty Dollar. We're going to be talking about how his work influenced Satoshi Nakamoto, creating Bitcoin, the first decentralized cryptocurrency. But Bernard, I really appreciate you accepting my invitation to come on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris.
And to quote my friend Nathan Hawk, Bernard von Nothaus is a badass. So I really appreciate what you've done, Bernard. Some people who are watching this are probably going to be very unfamiliar with the Liberty Dollar and when it came out and what it was all about. And we're going to get into that. I'm going to have links down below for everything that we talk about today. And there's a really cool website that people can visit as well, bernardvonnothaus.org. And there's a bio here, which goes into a little bit more information, which I'm going to be screen sharing that Bernard can't see because we're recording on his phone. But Bernard, do you mind kind of, for people who are unfamiliar with you, do you mind kind of giving a little background as to who Bernard von Nothaus is?
Sure, Chris. I don't know where you want me to start. I've been in the metals business for almost 50 years. I wrote an economic research paper. I've done an enormous amount of work in terms of monetary economics. And there was a particular point in my life where I had to either shit or get off the pot. I had written an economic research paper. Actually, I wrote the economic research paper in one day.
Wow.
Yeah. I had done a lot of research. This was the early 70s. The economic research paper is dated 1974, October 1st, 1974. And there was a particular point where I had to make a decision about, do I go forward with this or do I just walk away from this? But it was so engaging, and the message in my head, for lack of a better phrase, was so empowering for me to do something that I made a deal with the voice in my head. I said, okay, I'll give it one day to write this economic research paper, which of course is ludicrous. Nobody writes an economic research paper in one day, I said in the voice, I said, give it to me good, give it to me fast, I'll give it one day. And so I sat down and I wrote the economic research paper in one day. And the next day I asked my lady, Telly, to type it up. She said, well, you wrote it in a day, I'll type it in a day. And she did, And we went out, we made a couple copies, and people were enthralled. So then I went out and made 100 copies. Now, this was a lot. At the time, we were living without electricity or a car, or of course, without a phone. This is long before cell phones. This is 72 now, okay?
That's actually that's 3 years before I was born.
Really good years, Chris. Anyway, so we hitchhiked in town with the draft of the economic research paper, and we didn't know where we were going. We didn't have a car, so that's why we hitchhiked. And so we were coming into Hilo, this on the big island of Hawaii. When we were coming into town, there was a big sign for Post Press. This was a well-known mini chain that was happening at that time. And I said, oh, here, just pull in here. The guy who we hitchhiked to ride with, he dropped us off in front of the Post Press printing press, and we walked in and we said, well, we'd like to get a couple copies made of this. And they pulled out my, 24 page, 40 page, I forget how many pages it is. That's ancient history. Anyway, I pulled that out, and the sign said it was 10 cents a copy. And, even at 10 cents a copy, 40 pages, that'd be like $4. And, 10 of them would be $40, 100 would be $400. I mean, way past our budget. I mean, we didn't have any money. Honest to God, we really didn't have any money, or a car. And so, as I was mulling over, the guy started looking at the paper, and he goes, wow, this is pretty interesting stuff. I said, yeah, I just wrote it. He goes, really? He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, if you'll give me the first copy, I'll print out 100 copies for $100. And I looked at him, I said, all right. I mean, you can't fight that.
Right.
So we went up to the library and we researched mints. What do mints do? How do they make coins? How do you make coins? And we whiled away looking at that, and we went back down and we picked up our copies. We hitched back home. The next day, I went out on a little evangelistic walk around the neighborhood, visiting all of my neighbors around there, showing that I'd written an economic research paper, and would they give me $3? You got to talk about margin here. If I'm buying it $1, I'm selling at $3, that sounds reasonable to me. And of course, it sounded reasonable to them. They gave me $3. They went, hot damn, I'm in business. And so that's what we did. We just started doing that, and it just grew and grew. And then we started the Royal Hawaiian Mint. I became the mint master there, and we did that. And it's coming up to its 50th anniversary here in about 3 more years. But back on,
Congratulations.
oh, thank you. So back on Liberty Dollar. Um,
Well, real quick, can I pause you?
of course,
The paper that you put out, was
we're
that
offline now. Or
can you
are
not
we
hear
off?
me?
I can hear you. I just don't
Okay.
know if we're
No.
offline.
No. I'm just saying. I was saying pause. Like, can I pause you? Like with where you're at,
Sure,
so I can ask you something to get some more
sure.
clarity. So
Please.
you wrote the original paper in somewhere around 1974,
Yes, exactly.
and to give and
September the 11th, 1974.
okay, yeah, because that's what's on your webpage, and then that
Mhm.
is to no value. Is that
To
what
No
it's called?
Value was the name of the economic research paper. That's right.
Okay, and then ultimately, American Financial Press published a Liberty Dollar solution to the Federal Reserve, a 500-page monetary treatise in 2003.
That's
When
right.
did the NORFED, National Organization for the Repeal of the Federal Reserve Act and Internal Revenue Code, when that was founded in 1998?
That was in 1998 also. We didn't really have a complete name when we launched the Liberty Dollar. Um, so we just called it Liberty Dollar.
Okay,
And then there was so much negativity. I don't know if you remember 1998 or the early 1900s, or the 1990s, I should say.
right. Yeah, the early
Um,
1900s. I've studied like the creation of the Federal Reserve. We have mutual friend and Mr. G. Edward Griffin.
Of course, of course. Ed was a big supporter. And so when I started the Liberty Dollar, there was so much negativity that we branched it out to include the repeal of the Federal Reserve Act.
Okay. Now, one thing I do want to specify to people is that, and we're going to get into some of the Wikipedia stuff because there's a lot of misinformation that Wikipedia reports. When me and you had spoken on the phone, Bernard, I had said, I wanted to highlight what you had done. You created a currency to compete against the Federal Reserve and the U.S. dollar, and you quickly corrected me.
Actually, yes, I did.
Because you
And
said you created an alternative
I,
currency.
I was quick to correct you again right now too, because we were never in competition with the U.S. dollar. It was never our content. We never even considered the word competition
Right.
because
And I
who's going to?
misspoke.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I need to make that clear because we didn't have anything against the U.S. dollar. We were just simply out there to issue what we considered, and a lot of other people consider, a superior currency.
Well, it's an alternative. And to note, too, the time period that we're talking about, like in 1974, when you wrote this paper, gold was still at that time outlawed for U.S. citizens to own it. 71, 3 years prior, which are now coming on to the anniversary of, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. So our money was it wasn't money at that point. It was currency. And it wasn't backed by precious metals, which our gold and silver, which our Constitution states that all money is created is supposed, by our government and by any other entities, is supposed to be backed by precious metals, which wasn't taking place. So what you were doing, to me, was just bringing back the idea of sound money, and creating an alternative currency. And again, I appreciate you correcting me because you're definitely not somebody who's trying to take down the system. And I definitely want people to know that you're not that kind of individual. You're not someone trying to tear down the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve. You're trying to give people an alternative that would give them another choice. Because if all you're stuck with is the U.S. dollar, we know that it's been losing purchasing power. Everything that we've experienced just in the past year and a half, we've seen more than 25% of the money supply being printed up. We see inflation taking place. So, I mean, it's crazy insane. So I just wanted to make sure I was giving some context of history of what was going on in the 70s and to specify certain elements. So you created NORFED, you created the Royal Hawaiian Mint right afterwards, it looks like, kind of in 99, am I mistaken? Or when did you create the Royal Hawaiian Mint?
Oh no, the Royal Hawaiian Mint was founded in 1974 also.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so you were in Hawaii back then when you wrote your first paper.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
And then you launched the Liberty Dollar. And so to read directly from your bio, for 25 years, from 74 to 1999, BVNH, which is your initials, was the mint master at the Royal Hawaiian Mint and studied monetary economics and search for value-based solutions to the poorly performing U.S. dollar.
That's
and
correct.
Talks about the founding of Norfed, and then it says that you launched, introduced the Liberty Dollar to exemplify the principles of a free market, value-based private currency that was not controlled or manipulated by the U.S. government from a meager investment of $6,300. So it seems like you've been able to work with a little bit and turn that into a lot, which is a great thing. So any comments? Anything you want to add to that?
The Liberty Dollar was wildly successful. It was amazing. Nobody was more amazed than I was. I didn't know how many people felt about the U.S. dollar. I mean, it certainly wasn't an activist currency in terms of anything being against the U.S. government. It was simply the fact that the government's money wasn't any good. It didn't hold its value. And as you pointed out, it didn't meet the criteria of the U.S. Constitution. So I simply, as I'm a veteran, I think it's everybody's obligation, men and women, to support the government and call the government to task if they're not doing what is right. I mean, that's political activism for you,
Right. 100%.
I had no idea that what I was doing, as a matter of fact, not that I have any idea what I was doing was illegal. I had attorneys that told me what I was doing was legal, because G. Edward Griffin, for example, he was very concerned about the legality of the Liberty Dollar. Ed is a very straight up, wonderful person, a good friend. But he was concerned about the legality. And of course, I had to ascertain for him and for a lot of other people that what I was proposing was legal. And indeed, it was. And Ed became a big supporter. And of course, a few 100,000 other people became big supporters.
What was the motto that you had came up with the Liberty Dollar?
The model that we came up with, we came up with quite a few. Which one?
The one that's listed on your website. Because now, for people that don't know this, we started recording an interview and seemed to have a lot of interference or some issues going on. So we went ahead and went to another format using Bernard's phone. You had mentioned the change the money, change the country.
Yes. Now, that was a phrase.
On that?
Well, I think it speaks for itself. If you're not happy with what the government is doing or what the country is doing, I mean, this grew up out of, the Vietnam War. Look at the government facilities that the U.S. government has around the world and how much it spends on war and more war. We should be having a very kick-back, happy time on this planet.
We should be.
We should not be having a very bad time because the money is bad. But when the money is bad, well, then that infects society. Value is fundamental for man and women. It is something that we all adhere to. We all have a moral compass. We know what is right and wrong. And when you see something is wrong, morally you're required to take action. And that's all I did was I just took some action. I had no idea that the damn good for nothing, lying, cheating, stealing federal government would not like what I was doing. They obviously couldn't take a joke.
Well, and in a sense, I mean, the joke was on them with what you were trying to wake people up as what sound money in versus what the government, the U.S. dollar was. I shouldn't say that the government issued because it wasn't technically government issued. It was issued by the Federal Reserve. It's their debt notes. But
that's right. That's right.
So,
and
I mean,
of course, it wasn't. The Liberty Dollar is a far cry from a joke itself, too.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, that's why I said at the very beginning of what we were talking about, like towards the end, we'll talk about how this whole thing was an influence to the cypherpunks and to Satoshi Nakamoto, the person, the group, and the creation of Bitcoin. It makes complete sense. And this was another reason why I wanted to bring you on the channel, which again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do. And I wanted to highlight this. I wanted to let people know what you had done because Bernard, I really try to let people know, and you're an example of this,
right?
That individually, we have the power to make change, no matter how big or small that change is. And collectively, there's nothing that we can't do together. That when enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people. So showing what one person can do and how that can influence other people and how it can start a whole entire movement or keep a movement fueling and educate people about the truth, I've got to commend that. And that was a reason why I wanted to bring you on. And I'm not a fan of the federal government or the Federal Reserve, and I'm pretty outspoken against both. It's
right.
It's tragic about what happened. So you had a situation, how long was a Liberty Dollar in existence before you started having legal problems with the federal government?
Right. Well, the Liberty Dollar was launched in 98, and it was 2007 when the government really started taking actions, and it probably secretly started in 2006. But I mean, we had legal opinion letters, we had comments, we had people from government officials saying what we were illegal. Liberty Dollar showed up on the front page of the Washington Post twice.
I mean, there was write-ups in Forbes, New York Times. I mean, that's why. So for someone who's a little bit younger, they may not have heard about this stuff because they didn't want people to know about what you did, and then the people that did find out about what you did, they wanted to paint you in a really negative, bad light. And that was another reason why I wanted to bring you on, because you even mentioned in the bio, which I'm not sure who wrote the bio, but I'm looking at the bio and it says that ultimately the FBI and the federal government didn't like what they did, and they were charging you with they raided your facility, charged you and convicted you, and they were trying to get you with counterfeiting and conspiracy to transform and conspiracy that was going to transform you as a monetary activist into a monetary criminal. And the FBI press release even branded you as a domestic terrorist.
Now, hold on one second, because you bring up the press release, right, as a domestic terrorist.
Right.
Do you know that press release? Who wrote that press release?
If it says the FBI's press release, I think the FBI wrote it.
That's right. Yeah, the FBI wrote it.
Yeah.
And they wrote that press release. Now, I've done a fair bit of writing, a half a dozen books or so. So I'm kind of experienced with the writing experience. And I can tell you that even if you're really good, you don't sit down and write something like that in a half an hour. And that had to go through some channels too, right? Mm-hmm. And so, it was the FBI that was really the, I don't want to say a bad word here, but it's in a wood pile,
Well, my content that doesn't get promoted to children, so it's all right to use adult language.
Yeah, well, I don't like using this word
I
because
respect it. I respect it. I just want to
it's
let you know we don't.
negative. It's negative, and it should not be negative. Because I have, I don't have any racist feelings whatsoever at all.
Well, Bernard, I want to move on real quick and highlight this stuff from Wikipedia, because
Okay, go for it.
it seems like some of the stuff that I just where we talk about the FBI's press release, some of that kind of corresponds in what was stated here. So Wikipedia states that you are the creator of the Liberty Dollar and a co-founder of the Royal Hawaiian Mint Company, which you've confirmed.
Yes.
He's also the founder of the Cannabis Spiritual Center, an educational institution that supports the use of marijuana in spiritual settings.
It's a 501c3,
which I commend you for. And then
that's a miracle.
Oh no, it is. You were telling me that it was one of the first cannabis nonprofits.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sure there may be a couple other ones out there, but at the time it was the only nonprofit 501. Now this is by the IRS. I have my paperwork, and it's a nonprofit. I think that it has an awful lot of potential.
Awesome. And we're seeing a lot of great results in the cannabis field. We might even be seeing some federal legalization, which would be amazing.
Yes.
Well, the last thing it says in the first paragraph, Bernard, is that von Nothaus was convicted of counterfeiting in 2011 and even accused of domestic terrorism. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and was released from probation after serving 1 year. So my question is, one.
Well, wait a minute. I want to interject something here because I want the listeners to kind of grasp the difference there, because the government pushed really, really hard to have me sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. That's what I was facing, and there is no parole out of federal prison. You get sentenced to 22, you're doing 22 years. And so I hired a different attorney to represent me at my sentencing hearing. And he had me write a summation of my case. And I gave it to him, not knowing, how many times you write a summation that your life is on the line for 22 years. That's intense. This happens all the time, right? But I poured my heart into the paper, and I showed it to my attorney who was representing me at the sentencing hearing. And he says, read it the way you wrote it. So I did. And I guess I hit a good spot with the judge, or maybe the judge was supportive of my particular point of view, because he was a conservative Republican, whatever the hell that phrase means today. So he asked me to stand facing 22 years, and he sentenced me to 3 years probation. So that picks up where you were telling the story. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate you giving me that clarification. But my question was, if what you were doing was creating an alternative currency that had nothing to do with the US dollar, how do they charge you with counterfeiting? Because I'm thinking counterfeiting means that you're making fake US dollars.
Well, that's a very good point, because it wasn't counterfeiting. It didn't look like anything like a U.S. dollar bill or anything else like that. And we had legal opinion letters saying that it was not counterfeit, So how did I get charged with counterfeiting? Well, that's quite simple. They had to charge me with something.
Well, no, they really didn't have to charge you with anything. They were just upset that you had created an alternative currency. I don't think it shouldn't be illegal to do something like what you did.
I agree. But the thing is that I don't want to say that anything scares, let me put it bluntly, the goddamn federal government. I don't think anything scares this government. But
no, they're powerful. The creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh my God,
and that's what controls our government.
But the thing is that whoever it was whoever is behind, the trilaterals, whoever it is that you think is behind the federal government, there is somebody that is running the federal government. There's no doubt about that. Whoever that son of a bitch is.
And most of them aren't elected officials either.
Of course not. They're not elected. Who in the hell would want to be an elected official, except you can get in there and serve only one term and retire, and you got retirement for the rest of your life. Man, that is a hell of a deal. Hell, yeah. I'd run to be representative too. Get retired. Well, I'm already retired. I missed my opportunity. But anyway, back on it. Although I don't think anything would ever scare this federal government. Nothing. And it's just so damn corrupt. I mean, you look at Pearl Harbor. That was orchestrated, clearly orchestrated, until the Japanese got in line to bomb Pearl. Where did the 7th Fleet go? All there was at Pearl Harbor was a bunch of old junky ships and the 665 servicemen that were killed that day. I mean, this was a setup. They had sent the whole 7th Fleet down to Guam. Why did they send it to Guam? Well, because it was far enough around the globe so that even a misplaced Japanese plane would not see the fleet. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, we're going down some interesting areas, and I don't think a lot of people would be disagreeing with you at all. But
let's get back on the money. The thing was that the government had to do something because I was just too damn successful. I mean, they could see the rate of our growth. The rate of our growth was phenomenal. I know. Mean, a lot of people, I mean, millions. I mean, that was terrific. I mean, what did I do? I went out there and I found a real live cord in the near comatose American body, and people just saw they were able to get the Liberty Dollar at a discount and use it at a profit. That was a good phrase, get it at a discount, use it at a profit. Hey, damn, that sounds like a hell of a deal, right? I mean, and then they found out that they could sponsor other people and they could get even more money. Oh my God. And then we had some great conferences and invited great people like Ed Griffin and other different people, to come and talk. And I mean, we were on a roll, and the government, again, I don't think anything scares the government, but the government became very concerned about our rate of growth and what we were actually doing. And that was change the money and change the country.
Love it, dude. I love it. I really do. And for people that are curious, like when you released the Liberty Dollars, how were they released? In the coinage form and in the paper form? How was that done?
And digital too. We had digital also.
Okay.
All three. So paper, specie, and digital. Okay. It was really easy. I mean, you could join the organization. That was a whopping $100. Oh, we were ripping people off. So you joined for $100, and you got, I think you got $20, or maybe it was $20 because you got the information pack, and you got a booklet, and you got a 10, a 5, and 5 1. So that was $20, and that's what you got. And then if you wanted to really start developing the Liberty Dollar within your community, you could become a regional currency officer. That'd be an RCO. And that gave you basically a franchise on Pacific area around where you lived. And you became a regional officer. And then you went out and you sponsored people. And the more people you sponsored, the more money you got, and the more money flowed through you. And it just kept building like that. This is a regular franchise model. There's nothing new, earth-shaking about it, except for one thing. We were dealing in money.
Right.
People like money. People like money. You probably like money, right, too, Chris?
I do. Yeah. But I try to make sure it doesn't obviously be my focal point.
Right.
It's just one of those things that we need. And the reason I did get involved in cryptocurrency is ultimately just so that we can get to the point that we don't even need currencies in the future. I mean, that would be an awesome future where we don't have money or currencies, and we have different
We're
ways
going
of
to
being
have
able to trade
something
value.
we have to have something to trade between ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be. Now, with the physical
Look at
coins that you put out,
prostitutes. You can't have prostitutes if you ain't got money.
well, you could give them food. I mean, there's commodities. So, I mean, this doesn't have to necessarily be
prostitutes,
money.
prostitutes, they're particular about their bodies and their looks. They're not going to be able to eat as much food. They need some spending money. There's drugs. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. You just can't deprive people of this. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll. That's what I grew up on.
Yeah, you were 60s and 70s growing up. These coins that came out, were they
coins?
physically?
What coins? We never did any coins.
You never did coins, okay? Because
coins a 4-letter word. Now I might say "fuck" every once in a while, but I'll never call a coin a Liberty dollar a coin.
Okay, so a Liberty dollar that's is it a medallion?
No, oh hell no, it's not a medallion. Now you're talking to a monetary architect, and you're also talking to a mint master who's been a mint master for almost 50 years. I know my shit when it comes to
what are
lingo.
What are the round metal things that came out? What would you refer to them as?
Silver liberties.
Okay, were those made of the actual silver?
Of course, they were made out of 1 ounce of silver.
Okay, no, that's why I'm just trying to make sure people are understanding that this isn't like that. These, because when you think about old silver dollars, they were made of silver. Some old coins back in the 60s had partial amounts of silver in the coins.
Pre-65.
So I wanted people to realize that these actual whatever you
silver
call
liberties, they weighed 1 troy ounce of 3/9 fine silver. So they weren't 900 coin silver like what the U.S. Mint and Treasury does. Okay, this was a 1 ounce silver 3/9 fine Liberty dollar called just a silver liberty.
Okay,
real simple. And then when the price went up, it doubled in value. Then we had $20 silver liberties. And then when the price of silver went up more, we brought out a $50 silver liberty. Why? Because the currency has to be in sync with the metal that backs it up.
Right. Which makes complete sense.
Well, if you're a monetary architect, of course you'd realize that,
And I'm definitely not a monetary architect, and it doesn't seem
but
like
you're doing very well, Chris.
Well, thank you. And I don't think the Federal Reserve was either, because it doesn't seem like they understand the concept of sound money. Or
they understand the concept really well. The people in the Federal Reserve are not dumb. They're just bought out whores.
Yeah. It's a good way of putting it.
They're not being kind. You notice I didn't say they're fucking whores, but they are whores. That's all they are. The government's made up of whores. It doesn't make a difference if you're voting for this Joe or that Joe. They're both hoes.
Well said, Bernard. Well said.
Fuck them if they can't take a joke.
Now
joke them if they can't take a fuck.
I love it.
Yeah. Don't get me fired up. I don't hate the federal government. I've never been opposed to the federal government. I served in the federal government. Okay. So I don't have any animosity about the federal government, but I have a lot of animosity about what the federal government does.
Right. Do you mind me asking how you served in the federal government?
I was in the Air Force.
Okay. I was just curious.
I enlisted.
Okay. I remember you mentioned that you were in the armed forces earlier. I just wasn't sure if there was something else that I had missed. Were there issues? Were there pieces of paper? I don't want to call them notes or bills, but
they're certificates. Certificates. So silver certificates.
And you issued certificates so that when because this is something I found to be really interesting. When the FBI came and raided your facility and took over 8 tons of gold and silver, when everything was said and done and you were convicted and everything happened, they had to return that gold and silver back to the original owners. And the original owners would be the people who owned those certificates, those warehouse receipts. Am I correct with that?
That's correct.
Can you explain that concept and how that worked?
I'm back again.
You're back.
I'm back. You know,
know
I
you
went off
left.
screen for a few
I
minutes.
saw you. I saw you.
Yeah. Okay. So give that to me again, just a little bit about what exactly you want.
Well, how does the concept work that the government, when they came in and raided you and they took over 8 tons of gold and silver, it ultimately, I'm trying to find where it says the actual verbiage here on Wikipedia, because that part was at least correct. It said that despite the conviction, the manufacture and distribution of the Liberty Dollars, the U.S. District Court Judge Richard Voorhees ruled in late 2014 that seized property is not deemed as contraband and should be returned to the pursuance to ownership claims. So what I'm trying to specify is that those certificates, those warehouse receipts that other people owned were representations of the silver and gold that was being stored at your facility. Is that correct?
Well, it was being stored at a warehouse. It wasn't at my facility. This was third party. You know, this is part of the integrity of the Liberty Dollar, because if I said, okay, I'm holding the gold and silver and I'm going to sell you these certificates, what the hell do you have? Why in hell would you believe me or anybody else or the federal government, for Pete's sakes, that what I'm telling you is the truth? Well, because we had this in a third-party warehouse, which had it, and then we had it audited by another third-party CPA who went in and did a physical audit of the silver that backed up the certificates every single month and posted those online.
Right. No, you're very transparent about that information.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, you want people to feel comfortable knowing that what I'm saying is the truth.
Right.
And having a third-party CPA certified to that went a long way to substantiating what I was saying was truthful. I'm not big into lying.
You know, I should have read more into this or remembered what this says here, but this is funny. This is actually something else that Wikipedia has gotten correct. So I have to commend them when they're doing something correct. It says von Nothaus has been quoted as saying, "We never refer to the silver liberty as a coin, not as legal tender or current money. The word coin is a government controlled term." I get it.
That's right. That's right.
And this is currency that is free from government control.
Right.
And I think I told you when we were talking on the phone privately a couple of times that there was a guy here in North Carolina where I'm at that was issuing silver. He was calling them coins. So it was back in the 70s before I even was living down here, but somebody was issuing silver coins and trying to get people to use those. And he was having some issues as well. So the government definitely does not take kindly to this. And then the crazy thing that they want to say in Wikipedia is that the reason for the counterfeit was because it resembled the legal tender. That it had dollar signs on it, that it said "In God We Trust," and it was
now all that was just shabai.
Well, no, I'm just telling you the hit piece there that's being added. So, I mean, I just want people to realize that when they're doing their research and you look on something like Wikipedia, and if you're studying anything about Bernard, you'll realize that a lot of this information that you're seeing on Wikipedia is just straight lies. So I wanted to make sure that we clarified that.
Also, let me just mention the original Liberty Dollar website, libertydollar.org. It's a nonprofit, so it's an org. And you can go there. The original site is still up. All the documents are still there. All the links still work. The site has all those documents that you're talking about. And it's just a fountainhead. Anybody who's interested in Liberty Dollar, certainly anybody who's interested in getting some Liberty Dollars should visit that site, because it's extremely packed with information. It has audit reports, and
I'm on the website right now. I know you can't see, so I am sharing the website with everybody.
Oh, good.
So you can still buy the Liberty Dollars to this website, or is it just a historic website that's just highlighting what was done?
It is the historic website, so you can't buy them on that website.
Okay.
But what's interesting, something totally far afield from what we were going to talk about, Chris, is that the Liberty Dollars have become an incredible collectible. The prices are just staggering what people pay for Liberty Dollars. You can go to eBay, of course, and you'll find Liberty Dollars. Oh, that was another whole story. The FBI called up eBay and forced them to take all the Liberty Dollars off of eBay. And
Wow.
they did, of course. But, guess what? It's decentralization really fucks with the government,
No, it does.
Because decentralized models really screws with the government. Because guess what? People still wanted to put up their Liberty Dollars on eBay. They didn't know that just a month before that, all the Liberty Dollars were being taken down by the FBI. Okay. So they would put up their Liberty Dollars. And eBay made a half-hearted effort to take down the thing, but it was an avalanche. People got lots of Liberty Dollars. I mean, there's thousands of Liberty Dollars out there. Not everybody got the memo from the federal government, and not everybody likes the FBI, So
I had to talk to you offline at a separate time about me getting a Liberty Dollar because I don't own any Liberty Dollars, and I would like to have.
You don't own any Liberty Dollars, and you're interviewing me. Shame on you.
I know. Shame on me. I know. Absolutely.
I'm going to charge you double.
You weren't even charging me. So now, is it double zero, or you gonna give me a figure now?
I ain't going to give you a figure because I don't know what hell you want.
I love you, dude. I love you, and I really appreciate what you did, and I want people to take the time to research this a little bit. Now, in the first time we attempted to record, you mentioned section, I think it was 486 of the U.S. Code.
486.
Can you explain what 486 is?
Sure. 486 is a really interesting bit of legislation that the federal government passed at the height of the Civil War. And they said in that, and the 486, I used to remember if it was 32 words or 60 words. It is the briefest, smallest damn piece of legislation you could possibly do. And 486 simply says that you can't issue any money that mimics the U.S. government. But that wasn't the finest point of 486. 486, behind that smokescreen, was really empowered the government, the federal government, to print fiat money. Because the federal government, I'm talking about the northern states, were running out of money during the Civil War. And so they created 486 to give the federal government the power to print fiat money. And also as a part of that, they said anybody else that copies blah, 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 I don't have the section 486 in front of me, but blah, 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 is also guilty of 486. And so how many cases do you think have been tried for 486? Now, it's been 150 years. How many cases do you think there have been?
I would think that there's been a lot. I mean, you hear a lot about counterfeiting being a problem in the past and things to that effect.
Right.
So you would think a lot?
No.
How many people is it?
3.
And I'm going to assume that you're one of the 3?
I'm the 3rd.
Do you know who the first 2 were? I'm just curious.
Oh, hell no. They're back.
I was just curious. Now, did this have anything to do with, was this before or after Lincoln issued the greenbacks?
This was legalizing the greenbacks, which
so this was all that whole same time period.
This was during the Civil War, you know. Yeah. And so the government didn't have any money. And so they passed this law, 486, that they could actually make fiat money, which they did. And they used that to win the war because the South was winning the war in the beginning.
And I'm at the, I was just seeing if there's anything I wanted to share on the Wikipedia site, which I don't really think that, I think we pretty much have covered most everything as far as that. Was before we move on and talk about how what you did influence Satoshi Nakamoto, I do want to let people know that this is not going to be the only interview that we do. That you've got something new that you're working on. That's all I'm going to say. And when you're ready to launch it, we'll go public with it, and you can come back on the show. You have that open invite, and we'll talk about it. So it's not as if this is over. There's another chapter that's going to be beginning, and we'll talk about that.
Well, no, it's not over. We don't have a value-based currency in the country yet. We're still being ripped off by the federal government.
We are 100%.
You know, until those little assholes crawl back in a hole and we have value-based currency, they can go to hell as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have anything that you
want? Let me tell you how I really feel.
I think I know how you feel. And I appreciate you being honest. Do you have anything?
I'm an honest person.
I could tell.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to add in regards to the Liberty Dollar that we haven't already spoken about before we talk about the Satoshi stuff? And I do want to mention that they call you the Rosa Parks for monetary rights, which I think is an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. Short-term memory loss.
No problem. Do you mind me asking about the Trump dollar? Is there any connection with the Trump dollar and the Liberty Dollar in any capacity, or is it just separate?
Well, we could talk about the Trump dollar for a moment. The Trump dollar was a project that I created. You know, I just have this ability to wake up in the morning. A lot of people have that ability. But I wake up in the morning with a wild-assed idea. And I knew who the Trump dollar supporters were. And, of course, I knew some Trump dollar supporters. And I knew that a really outstanding, well-done Trump dollar would be successful. And so I created the Trump dollar, not because I'm a supporter of Trump, because I've never voted in my life, nor do I ever intend to vote in my life, not unless there's somebody really, really good.
Right.
And that's an oxymoron. How can you have a good candidate with a bad government? I mean, it just doesn't jive. You know what I mean?
No, it doesn't.
No, you got to be some sort of an asshole to be elected. I mean, it's just, otherwise you don't get elected. Anyway, enough of that. What were we talking about? We were talking about
Trump dollar.
Trump dollar.
Yeah.
So I did a Trump dollar. Wow, was it successful? It was just incredibly successful. It was really good. And we sculptured masters, all this sort of stuff. I don't do something half-assed. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do the best I possibly can. And that's what I did for Trump. Did I vote for Trump? No, I didn't vote for Trump. Have I ever voted? No, I've never voted. I'm not going to vote.
If somebody wants to get the Trump dollar, is this still available?
Yes.
I'm at the website. That's the reason I'm asking. And I'll put links to trumpdollar.us.
Yeah, trumpdollar.us.
Yeah. I figured I'd add that in.
We did 4 different Trump dollars, and really well done.
You did a 2016 Trump dollar. Then you did 2017 inaugural Trump dollar, 2017 Trump dollar to make America great again, and 2020 Trump dollar to keep America great again. So 4 different years.
Right. It's really outstanding work. I'm not a Trump supporter. I don't support any political candidate. Period. If you're with the government, there's something wrong with you.
I love it.
That's all there is to it. I don't. Somebody come knocking on my door, I'm with the government. You don't do that.
No, I agree. Now, I know you can't see this, but I'm sharing 2 articles that talk about highlighting your work and talking about Satoshi Nakamoto. So people have heard about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a decentralized cryptocurrency. It was created by a group or a person known as Satoshi Nakamoto. The precursor to this is the cypherpunk movement, where there was lots of digital currencies that were coming out. We had DigiCash from David Chaum, eGold, plenty of others. And
well, eGold was long before that,
right.
eGold,
I think that was Adam Back, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not 100% sure.
eGold goes back to the same time with the Liberty Dollar.
Okay. So this article from Business Insider, the many alleged identities of Bitcoin's mysterious creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. So the first question I want to ask you, Bernard, in regards to this, and just a very point blank question is, are you a part of Satoshi Nakamoto?
No.
Okay. Because it is listed here that there is that possibility that you are one of the candidates. And I've interviewed Dmitry Buterin, who's Vitalik Buterin's father, and Vitalik was a creator of Ethereum. And his father is a computer programmer, coder from Russia, computer scientist, and he told his son about Bitcoin. So I mean, I had to even ask him, it seems like you groomed your son for this. Are you or were you a part of Satoshi Nakamoto's group, or are you the individual? So the first person listed is Hal Finney, which a lot of people, he's a lot of people's first choices, speculating as to who. I don't think it's one person, honestly. We have Dorian S. Nakamoto, which actually has Nakamoto in his name. He was somebody who Time Magazine and a bunch of media ruined this guy's life for a couple of years because they were saying that he was the creator, and he says he has zero involvement. The next one is Craig Wright. Below that is Nick Zabos, and Nick's another one that people claim could be, but he's denied it. And then we have underneath that Elon Musk, and after Elon Musk, and Elon's an interesting thing because he is a coder and he does do the C++, so there is some interesting connection.
He doesn't have what it takes.
I agree. But then they list you. They list Bernard von Nothaus, the creator of the Liberty Dollar. And it would make sense that someone like yourself, that if you were part of the Satoshi group, that one, you wouldn't admit it to me, and two, that you would want to do this anonymously, considering what happened with the Liberty Dollar. But when were you actually charged with the counterfeiting charges with the Liberty Dollar? What year?
I think that was 2007, I think.
So it would have been before the white paper came out, because the Bitcoin white paper came out in October, on Halloween of 2008, and the first Bitcoin mine, the Genesis block, was January 3rd of 2009. So you're saying that you were not ever a part of Satoshi Nakamoto. You did not create Bitcoin. Is that correct?
I did not create Bitcoin, but it seems like I inspired Bitcoin. And the reason I say that is because I had a chance encounter with an individual, and more than a chance encounter. I had an opportunity to meet an individual who was extremely high up in the techno information field. He worked for a very large international telecommunication company. And part of that telecommunication company was to be on the leading edge about what was happening in counterfeit detection, if you would. And so, I don't have my dates in front of me because I didn't think you were going to ask me this.
No, that's no problem. I'm not going to hold you to dates.
Okay. So, any case, I had a chance encounter to meet this person outside of my field. It's just one of those sort of things. And it turned out that he was very familiar with Liberty Dollar. And I went, really? He goes, yeah. He says, and he ran down. I mean, I was in awe. This guy, he knew his shit, And I went, wow, you really know a lot about Liberty Dollar. He goes, yeah, I do, And so he told me about these I, undercover, I guess might be the best word, high-tech um, uh, get-togethers of hackers. These were hacker conferences. Maybe you've heard about them. And the hacker conferences happened over a period of several years. And obviously, hackers don't know who's going to be at the conference, and they think that some of the feds or government or somebody is going to be at the conference. And so ubiquitously across the conference, everybody happens to have an adopted username that has nothing to do with who they really are.
Right.
Right. And it was this guy's job to go to those hacker conferences and pass himself off as a hacker to get a feel for what was new, because hackers were presenting papers about how to overcome, they had a hack, and then the government or the telephone companies or whoever it was able to determine what was going on, and they would be able to stop the hacker from doing what he was doing. Okay, they would throw up roadblocks and different things. And so because of this, the hacker conferences were really well attended by, if you were a successful hacker, in other words, if you were able to hack in and get a whole bunch of money, you went to these conferences because you were learning from other different hackers. Wow, look at what happened. Yeah, I got froze out of this one, but look what I did. Oh, fuck, that's great. You could, they were, cross-pollination techniques, if you would. And so he went to those conferences, and so I'm saying, okay, well, that sounds great. I mean, so why are you telling me this? He says, because he says, there was a guy that I met at this conference who was really hot on doing a new currency. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah. And he said, and I hung out with him, and this guy gave me all this lingo. I had absolutely no idea about what hell he was talking about. I mean, he could have been speaking Chinese from that. I had no idea. But it was certainly, he was certainly high up in the field, because I mean, this wasn't just bullshit, I mean, this was techno stuff, this and that. I mean, all this. I was going, forget about it. You're wasting your energy on me. He says, I went there trying to hire some other different people and to help me. And he says, one of the people I met there was this guy who was really into currency and really loved currency, and was trying to talk to me about coming on and helping him do some software, development. And right. I said, okay, oh, that's really interesting. I said, so what's the bottom line? He says, well, he was a regular haole. That's a Hawaiian word. It means white. He was a regular white guy, blah, 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 regular hacker sort of guy. His alias was Satoshi Nakamoto at that conference.
That's really interesting. I've never heard a story like that. I've never heard a story where somebody has talked about
so the guy
communicating in person.
Yeah. It was actually said this guy's name was his fake name was Satoshi Nakamoto, but he was a regular haole, white guy, And I said, well, how did you? So he told me this. He says, so you inspired this guy to create Bitcoin. And I went, I may get a big head every once in a while. I said, but that's a lot of bullshit. He says, no. And so he told me the story. So let me just wrap it up here for a second.
Sorry.
And so, after he told me the story, it's not something you forget, immediately. And so I said, okay, so I chased him down. I said, oh, when was that conference So he tells me the conference, and I can't remember the date of the conference, unfortunately. It's buried in my notes someplace, and if I pulled out my Liberty Dollar book here, I'd get a better idea. But anyway, so, we had the Liberty Dollar audited every single month, and we posted that on our website every single month, right? So I went back there and, I haven't told this for a long time, but I went back there and he gave me the idea of when it was. And there was a particular month in there in Liberty Dollar that we did I think we did over $1 million or something like that in a month. It was a phenomenal month, And so, anybody who was interested in alternate currencies would have been interested in tracking Liberty Dollar. And sure enough, that guy, that conference was held a couple months after that huge month with Liberty Dollar. So the exposure, I mean, I'm a fan of all the alternate currencies. I've got a whole list of them in my Liberty Dollar book. I mean, on and on, all that sort of stuff. And if you put the timetable together, that guy was telling me the truth, that guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, attended one of those hacker conferences.
Right.
And was indeed a hacker, and
now,
created Bitcoin.
I would definitely say that I can't say that when you say the hacker conference, I think more, and I'm not saying that you're incorrect. There's a subgroup in there, which would be your cypherpunks, which are cryptographers.
Oh, this is way before cyberpunks came along. This goes back a long time.
Well, you had a guy named David Chaum, who people consider to be the father, the father of the cypherpunk movement. Created what was considered to be the first digital currency, even though technically the IMF with the special drawing rights SDR in 1969 was the first digital currency. But David Chaum with eCash. Then you had eGold, and we talked about eGold. Then you had, after that, there was some mention of B-Money and BitGold. So there were some other ones. Some of these groups, one of the individuals in his group is Adam Back, who is with Blockstream, who I'm not a big fan of currently, but information that was listed in the Bitcoin white paper actually lists him and some of his information as references. So I could definitely see where everybody in this movement would have been 100% aware of what you did. Then trying to, and then don't take this the wrong way. Take what people could deem as the mistakes that you made and avoid those, so that they don't get in trouble or have any altercation with federal government or anything to that effect.
Actually, I'm not going to take objection with your use of the word or to brand me that I made a mistake.
Well, I'm not saying that you necessarily made a mistake.
I got too much ego for that.
The government found mistakes, and I'm saying that the cypherpunks would have looked at those mistakes that the government recognized. I don't think that you did anything wrong, in my opinion. I don't feel like you've made any mistakes. You weren't using U.S. dollar termage. You weren't trying to compete. You weren't trying to counterfeit U.S. dollars. So
none of those.
I commend you.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying that anybody that was in that category would have heard about Liberty Dollar and would have been aware of how successful the Liberty Dollar was. And to come up with a digital, and this could have been even before I brought out the ELD. That's the electronic Liberty Dollar. I'd have to look at those dates there. But in any case, the long and short of it is that I had a chance meeting with somebody who gave me that story, and I checked it out because, again, if I dug out my book here in front of you and I dug through it, you would see that there was one particular month where we did an enormous amount of money, and anybody who was hip to money, hip to some software That was the person who became Satoshi Nakamoto. That's
I
all
was
it was.
looking on your website. Is there a link for your book?
Which website are you on?
The Bernard von Nothaus.org.
Oh no, no, I don't.
Okay,
I'm
so I'm
really
just
terrible with marketing my material, to be
you're
honest
good.
with
I'm gonna and I said your name totally incorrectly, like how I did when I first met you, calling you Bernard von Nothaus when it's
you.
Bernard von Nothaus.
Right. Thank you very much. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
You
No,
know,
I
Bernard's such an asshole. You know, I just would never want to be a Bernard. Plus, it's German. You know, Bernard is French. You
right.
know how the French and the Germans are. You know, although I've
Yes,
had a
I'm
few
looking for the
blood.
book. Is it called Liberty Dollar from Concept to Crypto?
No, that is the 20th anniversary book. And that one there, I'm glad you brought it up. That is a terrific book. It really is. And in the back of it, it has a 30-page catalog, coin catalog. They use the phrase coin catalog, and I use the phrase coin catalog, but we can't use the phrase coin to denote Liberty dollars. Okay. So, anyway, there's a coin catalog in there that denotes the 100 issues that we've. I'd have to get offline here and pull the book out in front of me here and look at it. But there's just a lot of stuff. That's a really great book to read.
The other one that I got pulled up here is on Amazon. You got
It's
some
the
interesting books.
2003 book.
The Liberty Dollar Solution to the Federal Reserve. Is
Yeah.
that the one you're talking about?
That's the 2003, right?
And that's the one that you're mentioning. I have to get this book, One Toke to God.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome title. Because I
You
told
know,
you, I am a utilizer of the cannabis.
yeah, well, it's an amazing, and you know, I have one chapter in there. Most of it's all by PhDs, all of them friends of mine. Can you imagine hanging out with PhD? Actually, I find the PhD guys pretty
They're probably
sharp.
cool.
They are very cool. These are friends of mine that donated chapters to the book, and there's my chapter is in there about how I discovered the spirituality of cannabis, and then there's also a small blurb in there about the Cannabis Spiritual Center in Malibu, California. There's even an artist concept of the building that I'm working on right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in addition to being a monetary architect, you're actually an architect, right?
That's right. Originally, I was an architect, and I still love architecture. You know, that's when I did my theater, and I've done homes. I've done I've done a whole bunch of architecture throughout my life. It's wonderful. There's great sex, and there's architecture.
You've had a fascinating life, man. You're an interesting character, and I really honestly appreciate having this opportunity just to be able to communicate with you.
Well, it's been fun, Chris, you know, and glad that you took an interest in the Liberty Dollar and invited me to come and visit with you about that. If you got any other questions, let me know. If you want to do a follow-up or something or other, or if anybody throws bricks through your windows, let me know.
I will. I don't think any of that's going to happen, but we're definitely going to bring you up on a follow-up so we can talk about the release of what you're going to be doing here
The new Liberty
in the
Dollar,
very
right?
near future, in the very, very near future. So,
Oh, yeah. Well,
before
the government hasn't gone back to a value-based currency. So what's a poor boy to do but to go out and do his own, right?
well said. Well said. Yeah. Now, I mean, we are definitely, if you study economics and you look at what's going on, we are at the end of this fiat cycle. So something has to give either way, whether they want to, you know, you're hearing the World Economic Forum, Charles Schwab point, pushing the whole great reset agenda. You will own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting idea to think about. And there's ways that we individually and collectively can make a difference. So if you're watching this, you've seen what Bernard has done, and Bernard has made an impact. And he did that by himself as one individual. Of course, there were people helping him with the creation of such, but this was one man who decided to do something and ignited other people as well. So just take this into consideration that you yourself watching this can make an impact no matter how big or small. Maybe you could influence the next Satoshi Nakamoto. maybe you could influence the next group that's trying to bring back sound money and trying to educate people about what sound money is and money versus currency. So
That's right.
Bernard, I commend you. I thank you. Before we wrap
Okay.
it up, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to add before we do wrap up the video? Wrap up the interview?
Just to build on what you said there, Chris, is that follow your passion. Whatever gets you fired up and gets you up in the morning. Find a way to monetize it, and even if it's in money or even if it's not in money, find a way that you can make some money and be happy. And I'll plug the One Toke to God. It's a terrific model. It's really amazingly rewarding, insightful, creative, and a blessing.
Well, again, man, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to being able to have more conversations, and I look forward to being able to check out these books and all that good stuff. And then being that we are not too far from each other, you're both East Coast United States, maybe we'll be able to catch up in person. I'm going to be in Miami mid-November, so I'll contact you before then, and maybe we can meet up in person, which would be great. But Bernard, if you could hold on one moment, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up things on the video on my end and stop recording, and then I'll talk to you real quick. But again, ladies and gentlemen, I do really appreciate you tuning in. If this is your first time ever watching any of my videos, make sure you check out and explore my channel. Explore the links that are going to be listed down below in the video description for everything that me and Bernard von Nothaus talked about today. I do appreciate you for tuning in. And as always, I do encourage you to be the change by practicing change. Can you explain in your words what happened, what your father did with creating the Liberty Dollar? And you can keep it brief. I mean, you don't have to go into all the details of that, but just a summary of what your father did with the creation of the Liberty Dollar and why you decided to continue that legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to go into it all in much detail either, Chris, because
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's very dense. Let's put it that way. He created the Liberty Dollar in 1998. It was a silver-backed, physical currency certificates, right? So just like bills, like you have dollar bills, those were all backed by silver and so forth. That went along. Like you said, he did the electronic version in 2003, and then he was growing, exponentially, essentially, until 2007. Prior to 2007, the FBI, the DOJ, U.S. Mint, everybody had said it was completely legal, that it was a barter currency, that it was a private currency, no problems at all. Hundreds of times, different government agencies said that. Like I said, in 2007, the U.S. Mint came out and said, "Oh, this is now we've decided this is illegal, and he needs to stop doing what he's doing." He filed a federal case against the U.S. Mint, saying they didn't have the jurisdiction, they didn't have the authority to tell him to stop, having a barter currency because they had already acknowledged it was private. Instead of adjudicating that case, they arrested him initially for fraud. In 2007, when the case originally started. There's a lot of details during his case that I could go into if you want more detail. Ultimately, they seized about 10 tons of gold and silver from the vault in Idaho, which basically proved that there was no fraud, that my father wasn't just selling empty pieces of paper, that the silver that backed up those currency was actually there. So instead of going after him for fraud, they went after him for counterfeiting, which was a law that was written in the 1860s as a way of stopping the Confederacy from creating their own currency during the Civil War.
Let's pause right there real quick, because this is the emphasis that I really want to, this is the part that I really want to put emphasis on, because your father lost the criminal case, but the law that they were able to use to convict him of counterfeiting Because that was the question that I wasn't getting an answer from your father. And when we talked privately and you explained it, it was like everything made complete sense. Because I was asking your dad, how are they able to convict you of counterfeiting if you're not trying to replicate United States money, Federal Reserve debt notes? And if that's not the case, then how are they convicting you of counterfeiting? I never got a full answer from him, and you explained it and you started going into it, but I really just wanted to take that moment to put the emphasis on what your father was able to do by losing this criminal case, unfortunately. So go ahead and explain this in 18 something, was it 60s you said?
1860s, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, the history was that the Union, right, during the Civil War was concerned that the Confederacy was going to start creating their own money, right? So there was a law passed that basically it's two sentences. It says basically if you create a currency that is competing with the U.S. dollar, regardless of what it looks like, you're guilty of counterfeiting. So if anybody has seen the photos of my dad's currency, they are purple and blue and yellow. He never used green because he never wanted to be confused visually with the U.S. dollar, right? So
Right.
that's traditionally the counterfeiting that you and I know, right? I take a copier, I make a fake $100 bill, and I spend it, and somebody accepts it, right? This is in a very arcane law, like I said, where it says basically if you are creating a competing currency, then by definition you are counterfeiting.
Right.
And it had never been used before. It was never even used against the Confederacy when it was written in the 1860s. So by just the definition of him creating an alternative currency, a competing currency to the US dollar, then he was violating this law, this counterfeiting law. And so because the fraud cases wouldn't stand up, because he actually did have all the silver that backed up all the certificates, as the DOJ initially thought, that was essentially the loophole, if you will, that they could use against him, right? And so when he was arrested he was arrested by the FBI in 2009, and then charged with not only fraud, which eventually all got dismissed, but yes, he was convicted of this law because, like I said, just the simple point that he did create an alternative currency, a competing currency, and promoted it that way, did violate this law that, like I said, had never been used before.
Right. Now, the cool thing that came out of this was he was dealing with a judge that was retiring, and I guess this was one of his last cases. So ultimately, even though your dad lost the criminal charges of counterfeiting, that old antiquated law is no longer in place, and there's been a new precedent set, if I know this part correctly.
So the law is still in place, and so my father was convicted of counterfeiting under this very kind of narrow 2-sentence law from so he's definitely a convicted felon. There's no dispute about that. The prosecutors originally wanted the judge to sentence him to 22 years. They added on a domestic terrorism distinction. So they basically unilaterally said that my father was a domestic terrorist. And under the federal sentencing guidelines, that adds 50% to your sentence. So instead of 22 years, he was facing 33 years. And for a man in his late 60s at the time, that's essentially a life sentence.
Yeah, definitely 100%. I mean, if you're in your 60s, yes. If you're looking at 30 something years, that's putting you in your 90s. And most people don't live to be that long. But even if someone did live to be, let's say 97, getting out of prison after spending that much time and being that old, what are you going to be able to accomplish, and what are you going to be able to do? So I like how everything turned out. So how did it turn out?
So basically, in most cases, in most federal convictions, the sentencing happens within 2 to 3 months, maybe 6 months at most. The Judge Voorhees, decided to delay it for 3 years, which get into your earlier point of where he was retiring, the judge was. And so he waited until the very last minute of his time on the bench to sentence my father. And so instead of giving him 33 years in prison, like the prosecutors wanted, Judge Voorhees gave him 3 years of probation. So that ultimately, even when he was arrested to when his probation ended in 2017, he never spent more than a few days in prison. Which speaks to kind of the weakness of the case. And one of the things that Judge Voorhees said in the sentencing memorandum, and I was there, in the courtroom listening to it, was in most counterfeiting cases, you're giving somebody something for nothing, and you're getting something of value back to you, right? I give you a fake $100 bill, you give me $100 of product, now you're out $100, right? There's victims.
Yes.
There was never a single victim who would ever come forward and testify against my father. Not of the 250,000 people who used my dad's currency would ever come forward and testify against him. Not during the trial and not during sentencing. So essentially what Judge Voorhees said was, we have no victims here. We have nobody who has lost money. In reality, silver had gone up and gold had gone up during the time that had been confiscated from the DOJ. So everybody who owned the Liberty Dollar certificates had made money, had appreciated in value. And so related to that was the DOJ wanted to keep all of the 10 tons of silver and gold they had confiscated from the vault. And the judge said that that's not going to be allowed because my father did not own that gold and silver. It's not proceeds of a criminal organization, as the prosecutors tried to present. That the silver is owned by the certificate holders, by the warehouse receipt holders. And so to allow the DOJ to keep 10 tons of silver and gold would be a travesty of justice against the rightful owners of that. And so he forced the DOJ and the U.S. Marshals to allow a process to return all of that gold and silver back to the token holders, to the receipt holders, to the bill holders, if you will. And that set an entirely new precedent of how does a warehouse receipt model with certificates and tokens, if you will, get adjudicated when the issuer is sent to prison or bankruptcy and so forth, right? Is that the way the warehouse receipts were done with both my father and with LD2 is it's a uniform commercial code contract where the certificate holder, receipt holder has a contract with the vault to always have ownership of that and can redeem that receipt for the product anytime they want. And so initially the U.S. Marshals were in charge of returning everybody who put a claim in for their certificates. And then in kind of a weird twist of fate, the question was, well, what's going to happen to the rest of the silver and gold for the people who didn't ask for it from the Marshals at the time in the future? And that was when the judge decided that everything that was left over should be returned to my father so that my father could handle the redemptions until 2026, which is when the last receipts expire. And as you know, in traditional fraud cases, you don't give the fraudster back the proceeds of his fraud in order to return them.
I know.
Which again just kind of like cements the kind of narrative that there was no fraud, because why would the judge go along with returning all of that to my father to have him do redemptions? It just completely,
Right.
like I said, undercuts the whole narrative on the prosecutor.
It's crazy. I mean, the government comes in and seizes said gold and silver, trying to keep it, and a judge does the right thing and makes sure that it goes back to its owners, because, as you said, these were warehouse receipts and they were basically like a certificate of ownership. So I appreciate it.
One last thing, if I don't mind. If you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the other piece that came out of it, which I think relates more to crypto and more going forward, is the legal precedent. So Judge Voorhees had a real, well, in his opinion, he clearly has a real problem with the DOJ cherry picking a law from the 1860s that had never been used before in order to prosecute somebody today because their fraud case fell apart. And so what he did was he sent an entirely new precedent in his last order, which basically said that this law cannot be used against individuals going forward unless the prosecutors can satisfy a few different points. And one of the most important points that relates to cryptocurrency is, if you want to prosecute somebody using this law in the future, you have to be able to prove, not to the judge to begin with, but also to the jury, that people are misconstruing these tokens, these cryptocurrencies, whatever you want to call them, as government-issued instruments. And so setting that bar far higher than it was before my dad's case is part of the reason of why this law has never been used against any cryptocurrency issuer and so forth. Because, in my opinion, and this is based on what the judge said, was that you couldn't convince a jury or a judge that people think that cryptocurrencies are issued by the US government. It is completely antithetical to the very nature of cryptocurrencies and any kind of alternative currency that they're issued by the government. So that was really what the most important long-term outcome of my father's criminal case was. Which is, again, why you've never seen this law ever used against anybody else since then. Because how do you make that argument? How do you convince a jury that cryptocurrencies are government issued?
No, I get it, man. I get it. And one, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it, because I really feel like this is probably, aside from the fact that your father did this, created the Liberty Dollar, this was, to me, the most important thing to come out of the creation of the Liberty Dollar, because it's allowed for, like you said, the cryptocurrencies to kind of not have this antiquated law affect any growth in the industry. And then on the flip side, it allows for people to follow in your father's footsteps, which is exactly what you're doing. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show with LD2, the Liberty Dollar 2.